Thank you for joining us, taking some time out of your day today to talk about ways to start taking advantage of AI platforms and language models. Specifically, this morning we'll be taking a look at how to use those for financial organizations. My name is Joe Kozlowitz. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Lunavi. I'm just going to run through some brief details about today's presentation, and then we'll get into the meat of things. First off, this session is being recorded. You will be emailed the recording later today, so if we go long or if you need to drop off the call, you can review the content later. If for any reason you don't receive that email, please just contact us. I'll put my email in the chat here and we'll make sure that you get a link. And of course, feel free to share that with your coworkers as well. You can ask questions using the chat at any time. I'll be keeping an eye on that. Do please try and keep them relevant to the discussion, of course. We'll also have time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So if you're able to save your questions until then, that would be amazing. Before I introduce our speakers, I also want to introduce Lunavi for any of you who may not have worked with us before. We are an IT consulting firm and a managed service provider that helps organizations like yours create the next generation of technology solutions while also empowering your teams to deliver those solutions in a better way. We're one of just a handful of Microsoft Azure expert MSPs, so we've proved our capabilities across the Microsoft suite of products and services. Among those, of course, is staying on the forefront of their leading suite of artificial intelligence platforms and services. We've worked with organizations in finance, relevant to today's discussion, as well as healthcare and energy and utilities to deliver real-world results through AI. And when we talk about gaining efficiencies or innovating with AI, those are kind of marketing buzzwords, but the real magic comes from those natural language interfaces and the emergent or predictive abilities of it. So these models are built on vast quantities of data that enable you to do so much right out of the box. And our presenters will walk through some of our work in the financial industry, but we've also worked with a Fortune 500 energy provider to implement image recognition that dramatically improved their storm damage response processes. So just out in the field, being able to take those pictures, have it run through the AI model, classify the damage, and just streamline that entire process. We've also assisted a health tech company in using AI to diagnose speech patterns and offer early diagnosis of brain disease. So these use cases for AI are really game changing. And if you're here today, I'm sure you're just as excited about this new frontier as we are. Presenting today, we have Sean Mills, President and founding member of Lunavi. Under his leadership, Lunavi has grown from its roots as a data center service provider to offering a broad solution set of innovative services around cloud computing, modern applications, and managed services. Prior to his 16 years with Lunavi, Sean accumulated a decade of C-suite experience in technology and marketing positions. We're also joined by Senior Vice President of Digital Transformation, Mike Douglas. Throughout his career, he's worked with organizations to improve application security and compliance controls, increase speed of delivery, and improve quality through DevOps practices. Mike is a Microsoft MVP in developer technologies with a focus in Azure DevOps. He has deep experience in DevOps, automated testing, and information security. That's all on my end for now. Please enjoy the presentation. I'll be on in the background to help with any questions or technical difficulties. So, go ahead and raise your hand via the chat at any time. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction. And Mike and I are here and very excited to share with you some of the work that we've been doing with some of our clients, as well as hopefully as part of this process, you're going to walk away with some amazing ideas of how AI could be implemented inside your organization. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Wanted to give a quick update on, what are we going to cover in this discussion. We're going to talk about why does AI matter, how you should think about investing in GenAI and other AI tools. We're going to walk through some Copilots and GPTs and how those Copilots and GPTs could be implemented inside your organization. And then we'll walk you through one of our banking proof proof of concept, proof of value initiatives that we have done with one of our other clients. And really, I think it'll spur a significant amount of questions. And so please feel free to ask the questions in the chat session, and we will either answer them along the way or we'll save some time at the end to answer those questions for you. So why does this matter? Really, right now, I think the reason why all of you are on this call is because of the realities of the disruption that is going to happen due to GenAI and the ease of use of AI inside of an organization at this point. So, we have been working with our clients on AI projects for probably the last 5 years, 6 years probably. And what we're seeing is the pace of innovation that is happening has never been greater. And, the disruption that is happening that we're seeing, rapid change inside of organizations. We're going to walk you through how some of these rapid evolution can help you and your organization. And the reality is this is going to have a massive impact on the banking industry. It's going to have a massive global impact on all industries, and the amount of economic impact that it's going to have is going to be tremendous. And all the way to the productivity of each of our team members. So inside of our organizations, we're seeing, according to one study, a 40% increase in team productivity due to these Copilots, ChatGPT, the ability to bring OpenAI into your organization, leveraging Azure and all of the capabilities that exist there. $15.7 trillion. That is greater than the total economic output of China and India combined. So this is a massive game-changing reality that is going to impact all of us moving forward. And then very specifically in the banking industry over the next 3 years, we see that this is going to impact about $1 billion increase in revenue across all the various banking institutions in the US alone. And so as we think about AI and investing in AI, there's some very straightforward, this is like back to the basics reality of investing in AI. There's really two places that you should stay focused from our opinion and what we're seeing in the marketplace. There's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of disruption happening. It's very shiny object, right? Like, hey, let's go all in on AI. Let's start investing in it. Well, how should we do that? And as we think about how we should do that, we really want to stay focused on measurable ROI. We've been challenged by our customers to deliver ROI value inside 1 year. And we're seeing capable of delivering ROI to our customers inside 1 year because of this massive boost in productivity that is happening due to GenAI, due to Copilots, due to ChatGPT. And so what we try to do when we work with our clients and what you need to be thinking about inside your organization is how can I use these tools to either make more money or decrease our cost of operations so that the organization can be more profitable. So, this is pretty straightforward, things we think about all the time as we're running our business, but it's very easy to spend a lot of money on things that don't move the needle on either making more money or decreasing your costs.
Yeah, Sean, if I might add, they're not new business problems, but with Gen AI, it's really a new way to solve those problems in a way that just wasn't feasible before. And that's really where we're seeing the most, increase of interest is now we can solve these things that weren't done very well before or just wasn't possible to do them very well, or do them in a way that the ROI wasn't there. And so that's a real key thing that is placed. But yeah, I think that's really, to me, what separates the buzz from the reality.
That's a great point, Mike. Thanks for that. So as we think about this in the banking industry and for financial institutions, we're encouraging you all to think about the metrics that matter. So when we talk to our clients, we are potentially talking to new portions of organizations that might not live in the tech portion of the organization. We're talking to finance and the business and operations with tech support. So this is definitely one of those opportunities to bring the whole organization together to solve these business problems. And so when we talk inside of various customers, and specifically for the financial institutions, you have a lot of metrics that you're measuring. You have a lot of metrics that you know the value of those metrics. And so it's pretty easy to start making decisions on where should we make those investments. So when you think of some of the various metrics, loan conversion rates, mortgage loan close rate, customer acquisition costs, like how much is a new credit card worth to your organization? Is it $300? Is it $400 per credit card transaction? Auto loans, are they $1,000, 900, 1,500? Each of these metrics have a value to it. So if you can close more auto loans, or you could close more unsecured loans, if you could close more mortgages, that is where some of this ROI will exist. Same with overnight customer support costs. Are you paying a significant amount of costs to support your customers overnight? Those are some of the places to think about. Do you have a value associated with 1 point movement in your net promoter score? So really being able to look at the metrics that matter inside your organization and make the decisions. Here is an area, here's a metric that's really important to our organization. Can we increase revenue, or can we decrease costs in order to make these metrics look better? Those are some of the things to think about as you're thinking about investing in AI, in Gen AI. And so, Mike, do you want to walk through this, or do you want me to walk kind of through this? So this is an example of one of a banking app that we worked with one of our clients on to help them understand what is the value of investing in Gen AI.
Yeah, and what we did was we really took it, and this wasn't the final one. We can't really show the final one of what we came up with, but this was kind of our starting point, and then we worked with the client to really come up with what was the kind of final ROI on it. But it's really about, again, what are those metrics that matter, and what would be the usage of this? What would be how much time or how much the effect would be is if this really started to users started to use it. In this case, we were estimating that this would cut back support time, and then also improve the IVR process to actually reduce the people that had to call in, thus reducing the number of people that they would need, or it could be focused on other things to do instead of just answering those like basic questions that Gen AI is very good at. And the thing about then calculating the ROI is, well, what is the cost of this? And that's a real important piece that these Gen AI services like Azure OpenAI are consumption based. So really understanding how many times it's going to be called, how big the messages are, and a lot of different variables to kind of get to that cost. And you can see here it was about $3,000 a month, and then we could do some further optimization to even probably cut that in half or even more as we continue to look there. But those are kind of some of the different variables and aspects of that to really get to that ROI, to then determine, hey, we could do this if we did this in 3 or 4 months. Look at the cost savings and that would return, and how much that would bring back from an ROI perspective.
So in the bottom line on this specific app, we were able to deliver value in an ROI, a break-even ROI, or a break-even analysis on these cost savings in under a year. And so as you think about, wow, that's a pretty substantial return on investment if you can decrease the cost of customer support from 42,000 or decrease it by about 42,000 bucks a month. That's a big number that could be really beneficial even to both small, medium, and large institutions. So I wanted to start to set the stage for what are Copilots and what are GPTs, and how might they work in the financial industry. So we'll probably spend a little bit of time here walking through some examples of how Copilots could be used in your organization, how an architecture might start to form in your minds of how we could start to address some of these opportunities. So really, Copilots today are kind of virtual chat assistants. They're voice enabled as well, so it's not just a chat assistant. It can be embedded inside of applications to provide capabilities that your applications don't have today. It can do things like sentiment analysis of text. It can do sentiment analysis of video, summarizing text, extracting information from text. So as you think about various forms you might have or documents you might have, the Copilots can leverage that information to start providing valuable components to your applications and valuable feedback to your organization. And we'll walk through some of the examples of that. Some of the nice things about these Copilots and the integration with your data is that it can start to bring and predict future outcomes from historical data that exists inside your organization. And we'll talk about what does it look like to have AI at the core of your organization on the next slide. But just wanted to give you some of the examples of things that you can do with GenAI, these Copilots and GPTs. So this is some of the exciting thing to think about from your organization. This is the part that gets me super excited. And so I think this should start to, in your minds, picture ways that you could allow ChatGPT, these Copilots to integrate not only with your internal customers, so your employees, but also with your external facing customers as well. We'll share an example of a virtual banking GPT that leverages voice to text here in just a second. But if you think about putting a Copilot on top of your AI, your data. So when you think about building AI at the core, really this is leveraging all of the data that exists inside of your organization. So you might have heard stories about, oh, well, the GPT's going off chatting about some other thing. The pace of innovation that's happening at this very moment in time is so rapid that if you heard something even 2 weeks ago, it is probably not true today. The amount of innovation and pace at which new features are being brought to market, it is just moving so quickly. So some of these examples are a sales GPT, creating a GPT that's really focused on your organization, your best salespeople, your best loan folks to help get loans closed, to help get mortgage closed. You can take those transcripts, you can take the capabilities of those people and help level up all of the sales organization by building out sales support GPTs that are helping on an internal basis close more deals, bring more revenue through the market by replicating the actions of your best salespeople. Similarly, leveraging your own knowledge base and bringing all of the knowledge that exists in your knowledge base that's in your organization that is really what makes you different to your customers in more ways, whether that's through mobile or web or through the telephone that we'll share, and grounding these GPTs on your data to make it proprietary to just you. So it's not going to use generic knowledge base that every banking that might make you seem just like any other bank. This can be grounded to your brand, to your knowledge, your capability, and your specific proprietary way of doing business. Mike, I paused to give you an opportunity to add anything. And
yeah, keep going. I think this is great. I'm going to jump in on the next slide a lot.
Cool. So then same for compliance. You know, as your bank is looking to ensure that their products that they're rolling out are staying compliant, giving general advice to the rest of the organization and doing risk assessment, a compliance GPT can be built and grounded again on specific regulatory requirements that are pushed out against your credit union or your bank, and ensure that all of your team members have fast access to all of that data and can leverage a compliance GPT. That is another benefit. Same with customer and member support. General inquiries or just account management and troubleshooting. These things can be used to ensure that your internal employees are following all the best practices, as well as can be pushed out publicly to the customers to get self-support that is pretty impressive. And then as well, this virtual banking GPT. So I'm going to share with you a video that I put together
thought about setting up a direct deposit to help
Mono
manage your funds better? It's a great way to keep.
Hi, this is Sean Mills, and I was interested in opening a rewards credit card.
Hi, Sean. This is Sally, your virtual banking advisor here in Denver. It's great to hear you're interested in a rewards credit card. We have several options that could fit your needs, offering various benefits and rewards. Have you had a chance to think about what kind of rewards you're most interested in, like travel points or cashback?
Yeah, I was thinking about a travel rewards program because my checking account balance has gotten pretty low. It only has about $100 in it. So I'd really like to start with getting an application started.
Absolutely, Sean. A travel rewards card sounds perfect, especially with Denver's fantastic access to both domestic and international flights. Let's get your application started. And considering your current checking account balance, have you thought about setting up a direct deposit to help manage your funds better? It's a great way to keep your finances streamlined and potentially qualify for additional benefits.
So the amazing thing about that, that you may or may not recognize, we were able to train this GPT that you are a bank in Denver, Colorado. We were able to train this GPT to say, hey, make sure that you offer one other product to this customer when you're talking to them that is relevant to the conversation. We were able to ensure that this person had 10 years of experience. We were able to ensure that this person was friendly, that this person was brief and didn't continue to try to sell something when they don't need to sell anything. And this GPT could then be grounded on that credit card application. And so this GPT would then say, would you like for me to push this application to you via text? Or would you like for me to walk you through the application and you can tell me all this information and we'll do it together? So one of the things, the nuances there are that I didn't tell it to talk about Denver's international airport. It just knew that it was an international airport and had great domestic and international flight capabilities. So it's pretty interesting. And in another conversation that I had with this GPT, it talked about loving the outdoors, like folks in generally that live here in Denver do, visiting the Rockies. So it stays very pertinent to what you train it to do. And in this case, we wanted it to replicate a regional bank or a local bank so that it helps the folks that are calling in to recognize that, hey, it knows about Denver and that it wants to relate to you as a end user coming to Denver or in Denver to continue to buy services from us. So how does all of that happen? And what does this look like? This is where it becomes really, really interesting. That was one of these specialized GPTs. So very specifically, that was the banking assistant GPT focused on loans. If you had have asked it anything outside of loans, it would have said, I'd be happy for you to put you in contact with another specialist, because this GPT was a specialized GPT. Mike, would you like to walk through kind of how this document, how to think about these AI core for financial
institutions? Absolutely. So when you're kind of thinking about this from a big picture, you really want to think about what are the capabilities and what are the, I almost call them like tools in the tool belt that you want your GPTs or your copilots to have access to. And that's what we're really calling this kind of AI core, is building out those capabilities and then building these very specific GPTs or chatbots built around those functionalities. And so what it will do is each one will have access to different pieces. It's much more accurate, and you're going to get a much better experience creating smaller, more specialized chatbot, or I'm sorry, GPTs or copilots versus trying to create one general purpose GPT or copilot to do everything. And then, like Sean was mentioning, the part I think is still really amazing to me on top of all this is actually having those GPTs or copilots working together to help provide a seamless customer experience for everything that you want to do. And whether they're handing stuff off to one another or they're even working together to solve something at the same time, you can have these GPTs doing that piece. The way that you can leverage a lot of your existing infrastructure or the things that you already have, one is on the data sources and getting access to those pieces of data that you want the GPTs to have knowledge about, so it can enhance that conversation. And the real key to that is having APIs that are exposing this information available. And essentially, we can create plugins, and I'll show this here in just a couple minutes, around these APIs to provide that interaction. And the really nice way is you've already built these APIs to expose the data how you want to. So you're not just like giving it access to the whole database and saying, we trust you, AI, go ahead. It's a very specific thing you've already specified. The other nice thing about leveraging existing APIs is you've already built the security to really build that security boundary and context in those APIs, so you can take advantage of that. So when a user authenticates, it can leverage whatever that user is authorized to do, pass that along to the API, just like if your application was making a direct call to the API, like it's always done. So it's not a different thing there. So you don't have to worry about Sean getting access to my checking account or me getting access to his, because we're signed in as ourselves. So we only have access to our own existing data. And that's really applicable whether you're talking about an internal GPT, where maybe for customer service, where you'd have access to maybe multiple things of data. But again, it's just whatever that customer service person's going to have access to. And same thing now with your customer one, like I already explained, like it's going to be to that context of that specific user and not really wide access to everything. And I think that to me is something that really helps kind of ground and specify like what it only has access to. So it's, again, not just wide open to everything. So a lot of pieces here to kind of kind of help protect, those different data sources. Again, that's how your answers, what we call grounded. And I know Sean's mentioned that a couple of times, with the grounding of the answers is really about making it specific to the data about what you're trying to interact with. And anytime we can do that, instead of like, and really that's the difference between just going out to ChatGPT and asking a question out there and asking the same question with all these different data sources connected to it. It grounds your answer, so it gives you a very specific thing and even more repeatable type answers too, versus the general ones.
A couple things to add on this. The reason why on the left-hand side we have an internal gateway GPT and a customer gateway GPT is that we would want to separate the types of communication and the type of focus that you would have between those two different ones. So imagine on an internal, so for your employees, the internal GPT would allow them to ask compliance questions. So it would talk about from the internal, it would go in and talk to the compliance assistant and ask that questions about how do I ensure that I stay compliant with this product, with this conversation. I have an investment banking client. I also have a commercial banking client. How do I ensure that I stay How do I ensure that I stay compliant? Same with the internal GPT giving access to a data scientist assistant. So now you can ask questions from marketing or from sales or from finance. Give me a 360-degree view of my customer. What does the distribution of customers tell us about how many people might take credit cards? What's the probability of this age group with this spending habits and this balance in its bank account, like my $100 balance in my checking account? You will be able to use and ask these questions through your internal GPT to get the answers to actually provide you back the list of customers from an internal perspective that you then want to go market to. So there's some amazingly powerful ways that you can use these internal GPTs and then the customer ones, as you heard with the banking assistant, and we'll kind of walk through some of the data. But the same customer gateway GPT, whether that's through voice or chat, so you can imagine someone in their mobile phone I'm sure none of us have ever tried to look at our phones while we were driving, but you can imagine pushing the voice GPT and saying, "Oh, hey, I forgot to pay my bill, my electricity bill. Could you please pay that electricity bill for me?" Just through that conversation, it could go into the mobile banking application and make that happen for you. So imagine just the ways that you can enhance the web capabilities, the mobile capabilities, and the phone capabilities of the way your customers are working with your organization. Anything else, Mike?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well on this.
Great. Well, and so then we wanted to walk you through really one live example or an example of what we have done to date and some of the ways that one of our clients is leveraging these capabilities at this point.
Yeah.
Mike, do you
So
want
let
to
me walk you through
this?
So this is the example of that virtual banking advisor. So you can see in the middle there, a typical or, essentially an interaction that a banking user would, types of things that they might want to ask the advisor in the application beyond really just even maybe what is specified. And what's really interesting about this is when we did this proof of value, we were really defining a couple key things. And that was one, we wanted it to be able to transfer funds from like a savings to checking. And two, we wanted to be able to check the transactions to see if my utility bill or some bill was actually already been paid. The interesting part though was the capabilities that were enabled on top of that beyond what we were just programming it to do. And the first question there is a perfect example of that. If I go out to eat less, would I save money? Well, we gave it the ability to access the transactions and look at your past transactions. The generative AI knows what going out to eat is. It knows what types of transactions are for going out to eat. And then it's able to take all that data in there and give you back that answer and say, yes, sure, you would actually save this amount of money to do that. And we did. That was not even one of the initial things that we programmed it to do. And I think that's, again, the difference between like traditional programming that we've been doing for the last X number of years to now, where we had to explicitly code the syntax for scenarios. And with AI, we're now just enabling these plugins or these tools and letting the AI decide when and how to use those. Now, you obviously want to make sure it's not going to go do things you don't want it to do. So it, just like in normal programming, you want to test it and make sure things are that. But really, it's real interesting there to do that. So the next one there is like, what is my balance for my checking account? Have I paid my energy bill? And can you transfer that money? So now we've basically taken everything and made it all into one question, and where we would have to have some really complex parser to try to figure out, oh, this is really 3 different scenarios all in one. GenAI, no problem. It just takes those, it basically identifies the actions, and we'll show you here in the next slide in a minute the thought process, if you will. It's kind of weird to say that for GenAI, but really the thought process it uses to help decide which plugins to call, in which order, and what data points to plug in there to do that. And it basically uses the Azure OpenAI service to generate the steps that it needs to do to perform that action. We'll talk a little about that here in just a minute too. And then it will take those plugins and call the call the banking core platform to basically deliver that through. So it essentially enables a lot of different types of things. You can, from an advisor standpoint, this can be delivered on a mobile device, chat. We can put IVR, like Sean showed an example of how it can essentially interact with the user as an IVR replacement. It can be integrated with your existing like banking and web application, or be enabled for your own like customer service representatives to provide answers in a more quick way and even better, just all through these types of things. So a lot of different things. And the nice thing is we can go out and call other services to really extend the capabilities of this. Really the limitation is what is enabled through an API, which is essentially everything, right? We could make it do bill pay, have it even go out and check your credit, do the processing of an actual mortgage, or even, have it walk you through how to apply for a loan. So a lot of different options all capable through this different service. So we're going to go in and kind of break that down a little bit more. Sean, was there anything you wanted to add before we jump into a little bit more details?
Yeah, I wanted to just add real quick, oppositely. So Mike was talking about how you ask it a question and it brings back an answer that you didn't even think it might do for you. One of the things you can do on the prompting is you can tell it, and as part of building this application, you tell it, do not speak of anything outside of the banking industry. And so in this process, we were testing it. We asked the question, should I get married? And the GPT came back with the answer, which is, getting married is a big decision, but your banking account shouldn't be a part of that. And so it's pretty interesting how it still answers the question, but it keeps it relevant to the conversation. So, and Mike, maybe just add a couple seconds on how that does that and why it won't go outside of that. And as part of that is with these plugins and the grounding, and it only references and wants to talk about things associated with the data that
yeah, and actually, if you want to even go to the next slide, I think that is a great way to even help show that. So there's what's called prompts, and you've probably heard prompt engineering. There's really kind of two primary prompts, and the first one is that system prompt, and the system prompt is really the rules, if you will, that you want to define for your chatbot and how it's going to act. Obviously, this isn't the one we used for the virtual banking assistant, but I think it's a really good example that some of the population is from a certain age will be able to relate to pretty well with the Microsoft Clippy that was out a few years ago. But the thing here is you can actually ground it and really specify how you want it to act. You can define things like how you want the personality to be. In this case, fun and helpful, right? If you kind of remember back to the day of the Microsoft Clippy there, and then even define some of how it should respond, and providing it some examples of how you want Clippy to respond. And there's some users that, and then to like what Sean was mentioning, you can also put the governance in there to how this should actually the rules that it should follow to make sure that it's acting in the way that you want to, right? Like you never want it to say anything negative about a customer, but you only want it to provide information related to the Microsoft Office tools. So a really key piece there that is there. And that by doing this, that really helps drive it to, or helps to give it the personality of how you want your chatbot to work. And then by giving it those data sources is really the boundaries there. And you can specify the preference or the order. You can say, just have access to my data. Don't use anything that is coming directly from like the OpenAI service directly. Only create answers based on my data. Or you can say, use my data, but back it up with the data that is available through the Copilot there. So you have the different options to control it. And there's a lot of different settings. We won't really go into that here today, but there's ways you can adjust how you want it to respond with some additional settings too. So one of the things that I think is real interesting about this is the way it can take those tools or the AI core capabilities and generate a multi-step answer to getting to the answer. So in this case, this is with the tool we used, it's called Semantic Kernel. There's a couple available tools out there to help. It's essentially a way to interact with the Azure OpenAI service without having to like write every API call. It's a kind of a framework to help do some of that stuff. And in there, there's capabilities to do these planners. And there's 3 planners. There's an action planner that's essentially one step that you'd want it to figure out what, if you're just going to call one of those plugins, you could do that. If you know it's going to be some different combination of those, you can use either what's called a sequential planner, which will essentially go determine all the steps it thinks it needs to take to get to your answer ahead of time. Or there's the stepwise planner, which we found in this case for this banking advisor to be the most accurate, which will actually go out after each request and say, okay, what's my next step that I have to do to get to this answer? So it goes through really almost a thought process. And here is kind of basically what it did. And if you go look at, a lot of times you can actually go see the thought process on how the Copilot got its answer. And here, it's basically, we need to do the account lookup to get the account numbers and the routing numbers for being able to transfer this money. Then we will use the transfer skill to really divide that, or to show how to transfer that money between the accounts. So again, it can use multiple of those plugins together to perform the action. And like that example that we had on the previous slide where it was actually 3 separate requests, that is really no problem for this, because this stepwise planner can just keep figuring out what the next step is in that whole plan to get all those answers. It doesn't matter if we send them one by one or all together, it can go through that and figure that all out itself. So this is really a kind of a key piece to that, to where we can actually drive that. And you can, this will make calls out to Azure OpenAI to determine this planner. And again, it really is this is how we don't have to explicitly program the syntax to do the actions. So we talked a lot about the plugins and what that really looks like. In this case, again, this is using semantic kernel. The plugin is essentially just a wrapper around our API. But the key thing that I wanted to show here was this metadata. And that is really the key piece of this. That description is what the generative AI uses, or the GPT uses, to determine when to make this API call. And it's really key to have a short and concise, but very specific use case for this plugin. So when it's trying to determine the plan and decide, oh, which plugin do I use for which scenario, it looks at that description and decides what to use. And then the parameters that are defined are actually the way it knows like what data to pull out of your conversation and pass into the API. And again, it does all that automatically. It's real interesting to look at the message it creates that it sends to Azure OpenAI and see how it's basically turned a lot of text into the programmatic calls. But this is an example of that there. This last piece I wanted to show is, we talked a lot, or, if you've used ChatGPT, you've seen it return back some real interesting answers. I think the big thing that we're showing is how you can really increase the value of what Copilots and GPTs can do by grounding it with your own data. This is a little bit about how that actually happens. There's what's called the retrieval augmented generation pattern, which really means that you are augmenting your prompt with data that it brings back to have then the GPT return your response. So if you think about the LLM, or really Azure LLM is the large language model, or the model that's available through services like Azure OpenAI. I mean, they've been trained on all data of the internet, so they're very general purpose, can have, a lot has been mapped. The way now you take your data and make it compatible with that is by actually using this embedding. What it'll do is you'll take a group of text, pass that into the Azure OpenAI service, and you'll get back a series of numbers from that actually map that to say, this is how it relates with other things. And then, so now you've added that to what's called a vector database to have all of that stored. And then what you can do is perform your search, and it will find the relevant data and information to narrow that down into what specific you're looking for. And then you can pass that to the Azure OpenAI service, to then bring back a natural language response that you're looking for and how that interacts. So that's really how those two things work together, and how you can take your own data and leverage that with the Azure OpenAI service or any other of these generative AI models. And from an Azure perspective, we're leveraging things like Azure AI search to do the embeddings and the vector search, and then calling Azure OpenAI with those results. So it's real interesting how those two things work together to basically give you that that chat GPT experience with your own data in a secure way. Now, and I think on the next piece here, no, I guess not.
Well, Mike, anything else that you would like to add in here? Maybe we'll take a quick moment to see, does anybody have any questions? And if there's any questions that you have, feel free to drop it into the chat. If there's an area you would like for us to dive in deeper, we're happy to dive in deeper to an area. So if there's a question that you might want us to go back to any part of this slide deck or any part of this conversation, we'd be happy to go revisit it. And if not, we definitely have the opportunity to help highlight how you can get started in your organization. Any questions or any areas you want to go back to and revisit or get any deeper? Well, feel free to drop them into the chat if you have questions or comments or want to learn a little bit more. But otherwise, we can kind of talk through how you can get started inside your organization.
Yeah, one of the
Mike, do you want to kick
sure. Off? So everybody's at a kind of a different place when it comes to generative AI, and I think every organization is a little bit different. But I think one of the common things that has been really important for organizations before you kind of jump in and start using it is to really understand it better. And the best way that we've seen out there is to really set up a cross-functional task force to do this and bring together both business areas, IT, and start educating the groups. Because this is one of those things where there's a lot more the groups don't know than they do know. So when you don't even know what you don't know, it's really hard to even be able to do that, to understand it. So really getting that education, see how it works, see how it can benefit, because these are the groups that are having these business challenges that they hadn't been able to previously do, or say, we could never do that, or that's impossible to do. And now maybe those use cases can be done very easily through AI. So getting them to understand how it can be used and what can be done to then be able to leverage that. And then I think it's really important to understand the appetite and risk tolerance you want to do, and really be able to make sure that your organization is at the right level. If you're based on the organization, a lot of there's a lot of range for that. We'll talk a little on the next slide about that too. But really, what are those risks and threats? Like if you're using ChatGPT, the public version of it, I always say, don't put anything in there you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the paper. And I think that's a really important piece to kind of know, because some of that data can be used to help rebuild the model there. So, so we want to go to the next slide, Sean. There, so on this one here, the kind of taking it to the next step is really about defining a policy, a corporate policy around AI, to really explain to users what they can do and what they shouldn't be doing. And it helps make sure we're preventing things like misuse, any kind of data leaks, like I just mentioned, or even misinformation to internal employees or potentially your customers. Now, this might start out with one range and go to another one as you learn more. You might want to put one out real quick that says, hey, hold up, everybody. We really need to see what this is before we start letting everybody start using this. So it might range from like can't use it to maybe what's some guardrails that you need to think about before you're using it. But it's really always better to have some kind of policy than nothing at all. And so if you're kind of wondering like, well, what are some of the concerns, right? So kind of breaking them down to like what's going into your chat? Like, what are you typing into it, right? Like, are you passing in some of your, like your own corporate IP? Are you passing in like customer or employee information, right? You want to say what's allowed and what's not allowed going into it. And then not just what goes into it, right? That's pretty easy to think about, like, right, you don't want to put in something like that, but then what comes out? And I think sometimes we don't even think about this, but like, it's going to generate an answer that sounds very confidently right, but especially with not using grounded data, it can actually return back answers that are wrong. And you really need to make sure that you're validating it before you're passing that information along and just blindly thinking about it. There was, yeah. So, and then, some organizations are wanting even a disclaimer on there saying this has been generated by an AI. And then there's also, concerns about the output. Is it copyrighted or is it not? And I'll talk a little about that here, I think, in the next slide, or 2 slides from now, of kind of what that means, what Microsoft's stance has been on some of this stuff. But it's changing. Like, it's going to be probably this year that a lot of this stuff gets figured out, but there's still a lot of stuff that's kind of being fleshed out of copyright rules and things like that. And then the last thing here too is like, what tools are approved? ChatGPT, should they be using the public version, or should be using something like an enterprise version or Azure OpenAI service? And we'll talk here in the next slide about why we are primarily focused on leveraging Azure OpenAI over the other ones. But then some of the tools, front end tools like Bing Chat, Enterprise, M365 Copilot, and GitHub Copilot to even improve our developers. We have a handful of developers that are leveraging GitHub Copilot today to help increase their productivity there. And M365 Copilot just has been released for the average users now. It was a 300 minimum license before last week, and now it's available for all users. So really, how to, is that an approved tool to take advantage of, and how to best use that. So those are kind of some of the things that should be in your corporate policy. From a Microsoft stance, on the next slide there, I mentioned about not putting something in there that could be on the front page of your paper. And that's really with the public OpenAI ChatGPT. When we're talking about the Azure, the Azure OpenAI service itself, it is a separate copy of that Microsoft has in their own data center that has these limitations. They're not going to make the data that you're passing to it available to other customers. It's not available back to OpenAI. It's not made to available to improve their models or any third parties. It's not going to be used for improving it or anything like that. It's only going to be used for your response, and that's it. There's a small, and you can even opt out of this. It might keep your data just to make sure that there's like not abuse happening, but then it gets discarded there, and you can even opt out of that piece of it there. So it's real important to understand each tool and how it uses the data. We really like the policies that Microsoft has put in place around this. And on the next slide here, the copyright. This is a thing that is still outstanding, but what Microsoft has done, it's kind of said ahead of these decisions that they will basically protect their users using the copilots. In the stuff that it responds, it will actually provide indemnity to any of those if there's any settlements there. And so again, good backing there as these things are getting used. I think a couple other companies are also providing some indemnity around some of these things too. But I think these are the things I think that help give us confidence in how we can use those tools. The next thing is really about education is great, but really understanding kind of the art of the possible. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that, and getting developers thinking and doing some stuff outside of their normal day stuff. Having an AI hackathon, we've seen, has been a great way to get people thinking and trying out and finding new ways to solve their organization's business problems using AI. Having the way to showcase different areas and examples to the different business areas, like Sean was mentioning earlier about the different types of GPTs in different areas and stuff like that. But brainstorm and capture those ideas, because I'm guessing there's a lot of people in your organization that have thought of ideas that have just, they've said are impossible, and they may not be anymore. I think it's important to gather those together. This is an example of some ideas that were captured with the client. And and then what we want to do is categorize those. Some of them were generative AI, some of them were more machine learning, other of them were just like different cognitive services that were specific. And we were really looking for a Gen AI example. And here you can see somewhere about the chatbot to IVR questions there. And that's the one we ended up doing in this example there. But that's a really key piece of this.
Well, one of the things that, just to give you a sense of how long do these things take, right? So, why is it that now it's possible to do these when previously being able to accomplish what we're highlighting here certainly was accomplishable, but it was going to cost a whole lot of money to accomplish it. We were able to get to proof of value in just 4 weeks. So we were able to go from an initial assessment and goal setting to selecting the pilot program and working through the process of selecting the pilot program to a very rapid proof of value in just 4 weeks for the development and integration. But inside 6 weeks, you're able to get to a massive amount of value that can drastically change the way your customers are interacting with you. It can improve loan close rates. It can improve many of these metrics that matter. And then the key for organizations, whether it's someone like Lunavi helping you or you're doing it yourself, you have to do the training and change management or it won't be adopted. You have to train your customers or you have to train your internal users to ensure they know what to expect. It's pretty self-explanatory on the customer side because you've built it to be very self-explanatory. But on the internal use cases, how to interact with the data scientist GPT, what questions can be asked. There will be some training that is required to ensure adoption happens. And then, one of the things that, we work with is in ensuring is making sure that you monitor it. And Mike, maybe just speak real quickly about how GPTs can be used to watch GPT and how GPTs can be used to monitor, is it doing what we want it to do?
So I know like traditional machine learning, there's always this constant training that has to be done. With this, it's already trained, but the thing you want to monitor is how is it performing? Because we may want to be tweaking our prompts. We may want to be doing some stuff. So what we recommend doing is you want to capture each of those prompts that get sent out, capture the results that come back, and then when those results come back, pass that back into the OpenAI service to then say, was this a good response? Or was this response an example of abuse, right? And capture some of those things to then, let's say there's thousands of results. We can now have the ones that a human needs to go back and look at to see, are these outside of our scale of what we want to do from a result? And that's how we can actually use AI to validate AI's working. And interestingly enough, that's the same way we're also creating automated tests to do our testing with it, because it's going to give typically a different result each time. We can't look for a specific string anymore in an automated test. We just call back to OpenAI and say, hey, is this what this meant? And if it is, we're good. We pass the test. If it's not, we'll fail the test. So very similar thing we want to do. We want to do it and then have like a little admin view that we can actually make sure that that's performing.
Awesome. Well, we have just 1 or 2 minutes. If there's any final questions, we're happy to take a question or two. If not, feel free to reach out to us here at Lunavi to answer any additional questions. If you want more clarification, if you want to learn more about how this could be implemented directly into your environment, we're happy to talk you through it. Mike and I are always happy. As you can see, we're super passionate about this, and we really feel like this is going to have a big impact on your organizations. You need to start thinking about how can we start to address our AI strategy? How can we responsibly start this process? And let's start with the highest return on investment items and work our way through. Thank you all for attending. I greatly appreciate it. Love chatting about this. and look forward to talking to you all in the future.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sean and Mike. Looks like we don't have any questions coming in right this moment. We'll sit tight for just about a minute more here and then close the call down. As Sean mentioned, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or any projects that might be upcoming. Thanks, everyone.